Welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Talking Tax with Tom Yamachika, and today we're going to talk about the fallout of the legislature and about tax. But you know what? It's not the only thing. We'll be right back with Tom for more. Yeah, welcome to your show, Tom. It's so nice to see you. Always I enjoy these times together, but I don't enjoy this subject. This was really a 30-second legislature, was it? And it was really bad news. And everybody you talk to in the street, ask anyone, they'll tell you the same thing. This was a failed legislature. And, as far as tax is concerned, it was a failed legislature for tax, wasn't it, Tom?
Well, we had high hopes for it because we had some, money going in, and there were some very interesting tax reform proposals that were put out by the governor's office, and the governor had agreed to basically shepherd them under his own office, as opposed to letting the tax department, with its then unconfirmed director, try to push them through. And there were a couple of centerpiece bills that the governor was talking about in his campaign. One of which was, a promise to get rid of the GET on food and medicine. So that was what we call Gov 02. That was the second bill that the governor's office was pushing, and it died really fast in the legislature. The other bill that had some hope for tax reform, Gov 01, had all sorts of neat stuff. There was a proposed tax credit for teachers who spend their own monies in the classroom, and we know that they do that. There was a bevy of tax credits that are normally used by people on the lower end of the income spectrum, including the credit for household and dependent care expenses, the renter's credit, the earned income tax credit, and the food excise credit.
Yeah, don't forget about the GE benefits for doctors to stem the departure of doctors from our state.
We'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that one didn't get a hearing in House Finance Committee. Never even really made it to the end game. So I guess I'll have to try again.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to go to the bottom line right away, but I think the underpinnings of this discussion ought to be why. Why? These are things that the man on the street would say, or the woman on the street would say, hey, let's do that. There's good policy. Let's reform. Let's improve. Let's help people. Let's make public policy that gives us all a better quality of life. And what are those guys doing, and why?
Well, for the and this will lead into our next discussion, but for the doctors, I think there were some people who couldn't get out of their minds that tax relief for doctors, that'll make the wealthy doctors wealthier. Who needs that? And so there may have been that kind of undercurrent, and the result was that the bill didn't go. Now, certainly, the subject matter committees, the health committees in both the House and the Senate were persuaded it was a good idea. Even the Senate Ways and Means Committee was persuaded it was a good idea. It just kind of hit the skids when it got into House Finance, and it just there was a roadblock right there. I mean, if one key committee chair doesn't want to hear the bill, it's dead, and that's an indication of how powerful this committee chair position is. Mm-hmm. But in any case, let's go back to Gov 01. There were some parts in Gov 01 that would have granted broad-based tax relief to you, me, everybody else. They would have expanded our tax brackets. So you would need to make more before the higher brackets kick in. They would have expanded the standard deduction like the feds did, and they would have at least doubled the personal exemption amount, which is the amount that you get for yourself, your wife, and your kids on the tax return. Now, all of these were packaged into one bill, and when House Finance got to it, they thought it might be better in 3 bills, so they divided it up into 3 bills. When the Senate Ways and Means Committee got to it, they reshuffled stuff yet again. And so there were like 3 or 4 bills. I'm not really sure where they all went, but they had tax credit language in them, and they had the tax brackets, adjustments for inflation, and that kind of language in this one bill called House Bill 954. Okay. In conference, the House and the Senate conferees worked on House Bill 954, and of course there were a few other pieces floating around from the governors or in a proposal in other bills, but none of the other bills made it. House Bill 954 made it, and when it did make it, they pulled back some of the credit enhancements, but they dropped the broad-based tax relief. They dropped the bracket adjustments. They dropped the enhanced standard deduction. They dropped the enhanced personal exemption. They dropped the indexing for inflation, and so what was left was credit enhancements in the household independent care services credit, the refundable income tax credit, and the refundable food excise tax credit, but only for 5 years. So everything drops dead on January 1st, 2028. So we had a great surplus this year going in. The governor had an enthusiasm going in. He was championing tax relief, and the legislature gave him 5 years of enhanced credits. One thing that happened in the course of this was imported to the teachers. It was the teachers' tax credit that got shifted off to another bill, House Bill 1327. It went there to die because neither the House nor the Senate appointed conferees. So it just stagnated in there, and poof, down to the cutting room floor it went.
It's actually depressing. If all these people in there, and this is what they come up with, really a bad session.
And I think the reason was similar to what I mentioned for the doctors. House Speaker Saiki was quoted as saying, well, he wasn't in favor of a bill that granted tax relief except to those in the neediest circumstances. So anybody who's wealthy, you don't need tax relief. Oh, by the way, you're wealthy. By the way, I'm wealthy. By the way, anybody who owns a car is wealthy.
Yeah.
So
what is this? I mean, there's a few thoughts to bring to the fore.
And one more thing that he said, which was very interesting. He said he didn't like the tax bracket relief and those adjustments because they were too complicated. Too complicated.
For you, for me, for him.
I don't know. And I'm thinking, look, if it's just adjusting the numbers of the framework that's already there, what makes it more complicated? Yeah, you have to look up your tax rate in a table, but you did that for the last 20 years. Maybe more, maybe the last 50 years.
That's a defensive move, what it is to say that. Life is complicated. Our society is complicated. And certainly tax is complicated. Fiscal policy is complicated. So what do we got here? This is not promising for the future. It is not promising for the future because it comes without a reason, really a stated, valuable, understandable, believable reason, and B, because this is not the first time this has happened.
Yeah,
The legislature is
and
on
when
a
they want
trend
more
here.
money, they have no compunction about, adding additional taxes uh, or complicating existing taxes. So where is the, oh, this is too complicated argument then? One of the bills that was being considered, I think we talked about that last time, was the film credit bill, and that would have like really overhauled the rules and created a lot more exclusions and exemptions and disallowances, which made it many times more complicated than the existing law. So a good thing, good thing that one didn't pass. But you know, is that too complicated? Is making stuff more complicated bad? Well, I think it is, but this is, I think, used as really a red herring by the legislature when it's just, I think other factors are more important to them, like tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich.
Yeah, well, that sends people away from the state, actually.
It does. It does.
But what about going to the reason, sort of in the larger picture of it? First thing it strikes me is that this is not what the man or woman on the street would have asked them to do. This is not responsive to the public sensibility, and that's not the first year it's been like that. It's been like that before, but this is pretty stark. So you say, well, out of touch. I'm reminded of all those legislators who say over and over again, "Come to me, talk to me, tell me how you feel. My door is always open. I'll always listen to you. Write me, call me, visit me." But then you see this kind of thing. You say, "Is the door really open? Are they really listening? Are they really responsive and sensitive to what the public wants?" And it strikes me that there's a real disconnect on that one. And the second,
and on that point, I think it's notable that there were some, very key legislators who refused to have meetings with the public. Oh,
why? Why?
not while
What
we're
was
in
the
session.
reason for that?
Oh, they're too busy.
Well, sorry, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Before it was COVID.
Yeah. Now it's, oh, they're too busy.
Well,
even when I went to I'd scheduled a courtesy meeting with one of the money committee chairs, and I got his aide. So the man didn't even want to meet with me, which is okay. And I met with his legislative aide, which is okay. But I mean, if they treat other taxpayers like that, you got to question whether they are really sincere about when they're saying, "Oh, my door is always open. Come to me. I'll listen."
the other thing reminds me of an article in the paper I saw recently, which said, "Should we really leave the determination of scientific truth to judges and to courts?" The implication was, no, we shouldn't. It's too complicated, end quote. How are you going to make a scientific determination when the trier of fact and law doesn't know anything about science? And you can have, multiple witnesses who have multiple positions, and ultimately the trier of fact and law has to determine a scientific issue. And it reminds me of this, because, are they really qualified? Yeah, maybe he has a point. Too complicated. Are they really qualified to wrestle with fiscal policy? Are they really qualified to wrestle with tax policy? It almost seems like this is over the head of the people who make the decisions? What do you think about that?
Well, it certainly raises the specter of that. I've had legislators talk to me in the past because they needed help understanding certain kinds of tax legislation, and I mean that's what we're here for. That's one of the reasons why we, as the Tax Foundation, exist to help uh, help people get to the truth about these tax and fiscal matters, even legislators.
Right. You got to study at night. You got to burn the midnight oil. You got to understand it. You got to bang your head against the wall. It's like going to law school, right? You bang your head against the wall until you get it, and then you get it. Then you're competent. But until that time, you're not. The other thing I just also want to mention is that, and this may be the most salient problem, uh, is that our legislature, and I can't make the comparison with other legislatures. In these days, there seem to be failed legislatures all over the country. Our legislature may be influenced by the mishigas, that's a word that means craziness, happening in Washington. Some people say it gives license, the same way shootings do here. All of a sudden, we have shootings on the street here in Hawaii. We didn't have that before. And maybe what happens on the mainland gives license. And there are some people in the legislature who are actively lobbying to ban abortion. And some people in the legislature are actively lobbying to, allow more guns and less gun control. And, I suggest that maybe that's like a virus that we catch from Congress or we catch from political parties and positions on the mainland. And we're not exempt from that. What do you think?
Well, I think it's less of a problem here than it is on the mainland.
Oh, I agree.
Primarily
But
because
is it more of a problem than it was in the past? Is the question?
that I'm not sure of. I mean, certainly in the past, I remember the legislature, both in Congress and in our Hawaii legislature, as being more, more collegial, more accepting of different points of view and accommodating some and reaching something for the for the good of all. Um, given that people may have differing ideas on what the good of all is.
Well, sometimes it's clear that the good of all is not in the picture. I mean, for example, when you get into grudges, okay, we've seen that.
Grudges and revenge fights, yeah.
Revenge fights and bullying and the like. What the message is we really don't care about the public. We don't care about good policy. We're just going to take the grudge and play it out against our erstwhile enemies, and we're gonna stop them whatever they want to do.
Because our egos are more important than that.
Yeah. I mean, I just reading the paper, I feel there must be an increase in in that sort of thing, especially this session. It's the only way to explain some of the things that have happened.
Yeah, it's very hard to find a cogent explanation for some of this stuff otherwise.
The other thing I would like to take up with you is this. It's the top-down business. On people's email, they have said one good man or woman can change the world. I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of people send you email with a little quote at the bottom, and that quote is kind of popular. One good, committed person can change the world. And the flip side of that is one bad, immoral, ethical person can change the world. And we see that. We see that in Russia today. To some extent, we see it in China. We see it in various places where one person has a huge effect. And what it tells you is that the way humanity works is over time, seems to me, and especially in autocracies, you have this top-down effect where the guy at the top has more power than he had before, and he uses it less responsibly than anyone did before. Okay? So if I give you a legislature, which is essentially run by just a handful of people, I give you a legislature that doesn't necessarily have to do the right thing, or to find good policy, or respond to the wishes of the sensibilities of the electorate. It strikes me that we have a problem like that here too, just mechanically in terms of process, where committee chairs have so much power, where the leadership of a House or the Senate is so much power, and that they can do what they want. And you know how power tends to corrupt things, right? You think that process is you think the process is happening that way, and do you think anything can be done about it?
Well, I think in the beginning, power has to come from trust. So all of these voters trust a certain legislator to do things right. They elect him in, then he's in office, and there is, I think, a danger that once that power is given, the person who's gotten that power will forget, or conveniently or whatever, that the power came from trust, and that effort is needed to regain and nourish that trust. Similarly, when legislators pick committee chairs, again, there's a trust factor, and there's a responsibility that is engendered to uphold and nourish that trust. But over time, I think people get used to the fact that, well, they have this position, and they can do what they want with it without fear of repercussion.
How
Because
do
that's
you
kind of
fix, how do you
that's what
fix that, Tom? How do we fix that?
we got to take a look at. The bonds of trust, and if the trust has been broken, we got to put new people in there.
We want to go to that, but first I want to say that we've had it in two capacities I can think of. Number one is we've had legislators who have taken bribes and gone to jail, and they're in jail now. That doesn't engender trust on the part of the public. I mean, even it's headline stuff, and even if you don't understand the fine points of how the legislature works, you lose confidence when you see that kind of thing. And the other is the bullying story, which is it's unresolved, I think. It's the same thing. It's headline stuff, and even if you don't understand the interstices of legislative process, you can understand bullying. Everybody knows that bullying is bad and it leads to bad results. And so that's another point where the public probably doesn't trust the legislature as much as it did in better times. But let me go to the thing about the voting. Okay, this is really important. So you say, and I say, and everybody says, you want to fix this, throw them out. Vote for somebody else. Is that really a viable opportunity? Does that really do the job? Do people vote for someone else, or is the voting process in this state such that it's not likely to fix things?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on where you're at. I mean, certainly there are places with contested elections, and people have to look at the records and what the various candidates are saying. If the election isn't contested, of course, there's no obligation to do that.
Right.
So,
Well,
so number
nobody
one is,
runs. So your first statement is everybody should run. If you feel there's something wrong, run.
yeah, yeah.
And maybe you'll even win. Who knows? You probably won't get the support of the people who are in power, but at least you stand a chance of convincing the public and your electorate that you're a better option. Okay, that's a possibility.
I mean, and that happened, for example, in the race for Scott Seike's seat. He had a couple of very, very close calls. I mean, he won ultimately, but not for lack of somebody to run against him.
Okay, so let's assume we have some new legislators in a given session.
And we have plenty this session.
Yeah, good point. Do they have any influence? Because the way it works on the committees is that the chair is absolute pretty much. And then on top of the chair, is the leadership, which is very influential with the chair. So this, new legislator doesn't have a whole lot of clout. Let me go back to my question. How do you fix this?
Well, I mean, if you're at the legislative level, you can band together with others of similar interests and effect changes. Now that you see that happened in the Senate several times. When Donna Kim was Senate president, folks banded together and kicked her out. Put another Senate president in, and shuffled up the committee chair structure as well. So, again, you have to have similar people with similar views. If there are enough of them, then they can, they can topple what's called leadership.
Yeah, but it didn't happen this year.
Didn't happen this year.
Yeah, and there's no promise that it'll happen next year either. By the way. So the next question here is, what about changing the procedure, either legislatively, that's less likely, or judicially? I mean, for example, there was this bait and switch, thing last year with the Supreme Court. They said can't do, what is it, cut and
gut and replace, yeah,
gut and replace. Can't do that anymore. That didn't solve all of the, the quiet under the surface, under the hood type problems, and it certainly did not solve the conference committee problem this year at all. And how many bills? It was like a magic trick. You put the bills in the top hat. Next time you look, there are no bills. And nobody knows why there are no bills. That happened with a number of bills, some of which you mentioned.
Well, I think the court getting involved has made it tougher to pass, stuff that's very much unrelated from how it came in at. And the production credit bill that I was talking about earlier, if there had been no Supreme Court intervention, you probably would have got that bill passing, right? Because it was introduced by powerful people in the Senate, and if there was no concern about, oh, this is beyond the title, or oh, this is gut and replace, then it would, I think, have been much easier to bully the House into going along with it. But this year, I think they had some good counter arguments. Yeah, I mean, come on, guys. The title of this bill is relating to workforce development. It's very narrow, and what you're proposing doesn't go into it. There's going to be, there's going to be lawsuits, and because of the fear of lawsuits, I think that's what killed it. A very, very bad bill, and I'm glad it died.
Hey, what about lobbying? We all know stories where money was able to buy a vote for or against a bill. We've heard that once in a while in the media. I recall there was some effort to change the lobbying rules, the fundraising rules this year. Whatever happened to that, and how important is that?
Well, that died, as you can probably imagine. I think you're talking about the bill that would have put in public financing for elections.
Or stop lobbying during the session. I don't know what happened to that one. I mean lobbying. I mean fundraising events. All the efforts that go into raising money during the session. I thought there was a bill that would have limited that.
Yeah, I think there was. I don't think it survived. But I think there are other subject matter experts who can talk more about that. I mean, with regard to tax, we've been talking today about tax relief and its death. in this legislative session. We talked a little bit about why that happened, and we can talk about other issues in subsequent episodes of this show.
Yeah. One other last point before we run is the media. I mean, if you want to get the public involved and have them understand even, quote, complicated, end quote, bills and policy points, you have to educate them. And my question to you, and you're familiar with the media, you appear in the media all the time. And my question to you is the media covering this with the candor that you need in order to, make the public aware and maybe change the way they deal either in voting or in communicating with legislators?
Well, I think they could be tougher on individual politicians when when the need arises. I think they kind of tend to stay away from that. They don't want to get people mad unless there's a really good reason.
Yeah,
So-
I think a part of that is what you were talking about before. If you get somebody mad, they're not going to talk to you again. They're going to cut you out. The way Trump cut out certain reporters, and he wouldn't talk to them. He wouldn't recognize them. He wouldn't take a question from them. And like certain, interest groups, he, given a legislator, maybe ticked off, and because they criticized him, and he not going to entertain them anymore. And so they're afraid of that. So they don't do anything that would be a bridge burner, so to speak. I think that happens, doesn't it?
I'm sure it does.
Okay, Tom, here we are at the end of the 32nd legislature following statehood, and it's not a pretty picture. And so I offer you this last opportunity to communicate your thoughts to the public here on Talking Tax with Tom.
Well, I think we as the public should make, or should do a better job of making our preferences known and getting ourselves organized to do that. Because, as a practical matter, that doesn't happen. And legislators are not presented with the testimony that they need to document the public's views. There wasn't a whole lot of testimony, for example, in favor of pure tax relief. So I think the case needs to be made clear to legislators, where their power comes from, and that they need to return the trust, and that kind of goes through the rest of the legislative system as well.
Yeah, including the political parties, especially the Democratic Party. So if a given voter or citizen cares, he should not only make his will known at the ballot box and in sending email to people, he should communicate his views to the party, to the Democratic Party, and ask them to take a platform point on it. And that should happen now before the next legislature. Okay, Tom Yamachika, President of Tax Foundation of Hawaii, joining us again. We absolutely, totally enjoyed talking with you. Thank you, Tom.
And thanks for having me on the show.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.